Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Show Me Show podcast. On today's episode, we're going to be previewing the MLB playoffs. And also today, I am going solo dolo. I'm Mr. Solo Dolo today. Uh, Cam is busy with school. He's, really, really behind. So he's not joining us today. Also, he doesn't really know ball because he hasn't watched baseball for the past 2 months. He said he hasn't watched a full 9 inning game since the All-Star game. So honestly, if it was just me and him, he'd probably just be sitting here listening to me talk anyway. He did send in his World Series predictions, so I'll read off those. And then also the MLB extraordinaire, Jacob Baldwin, not able to join us today, but he also sent in his predictions, so I will read those off on the show as well. But yeah, it's just me. I'm going to be talking some ball. I'm going to try to channel my inner John boy here and just kind of, fill time and space with this. But yeah, let's get into it here. So this week we have the wild card series starting off. Uh, it's it's pretty wild. The Astros somehow avoided the wild card series yet again. They just win the division. They're the Astros. They're going to Astro. Uh, I think we're going to start off, since it's just me, I get to choose. I'm going to start off with the NL. I think a lot of people start off with the AL. I'm starting off with the NL. The 1 seed is the Braves. The 2 seed is the Dodgers. They both get buys here in this wild card round. Uh, so the first game that we're going to be previewing, Phillies versus the Marlins in Philadelphia. It is the late game for all three. If you don't know how the playoff schedule works, the wild card series is a 3-game series, and it's all at one stadium. There's no traveling. So it's 3 straight days, and then all 4 games are taking place on the same day for 3 straight days. And the Phillies and Marlins get the night game, the night slate of that, whatever you say. They're the night game. They're the late game, which typically insinuates that it's going to be the most watch game, which I don't know about that. But the Phillies obviously went to the World Series last year. They're pretty good. They have pretty much the same team as last year. They didn't really add anyone other than at the deadline. They added Michael Lorenzen, and they didn't really trade anyone away other than, I guess they traded away Matt Vierling in the offseason for Gregory Soto, but he's sucked all year. So he's really a non-factor in this team. But this series, it's the Phillies. You just have to go with the Phillies. The Marlins pitching has been very, very good all year. Sandy Alcantara, though, the 2022 Cy Young winner, is not going to be pitching in the series, which is a huge, huge knock against this team. I mean, if you don't have your Cy Young winner, that's a dog that you're not going to have out there. But they still have a really good slew of rotation of guys set up. So game 1, they have Jesus Luzardo set up to go against Zach Wheeler. So a couple of aces go in there. Game 2, it's Braxton Garrett, which he has been a really, really good pitcher this year. If you don't know who that is, look up some of his stats. He's underrated. Going against Aaron Nola of the Phillies, pending free agent. So this could be the last game that Aaron Nola ever pitches if the Phillies lose this series. Pitches in a Phillies uniform, excuse me. And then game 3, if necessary, meaning no team sweeps, it would be Edward Cabrera, MLB The Show 21, Diamond Dynasty Nightmare, versus Ranger Suarez, who he's been all right. He's not really the guy you want to have on the mound in a wild card game setting, but I mean, I guess the Phillies, they're just going to hope to do what they did to the Cardinals last year, which is win 2 straight games and then move on to the next round. But the Marlins, don't take them for granted. We talk about, especially the first half of the year, their record in one-run games. It was just insane. It was like 24-2 or something like that. They just, anytime it was a close game, they eked it out. They won. Their bullpen is really good. They traded for David Robertson at the deadline. He's been really good closing out the games. AJ Puck was their closer at the beginning, but he's moved out of that role. He's kind of lost it a little bit as the season's gone along. But the Marlins, they have a lot of power hitters. Jorge Soler, big home run guy. Jake Berger, big home run guy. But then they also have, some ball players with Luis Arias, who was chasing 400 for the first half of the year, really fell off that track, but still a great leadoff hitter, great guy to have at the top of your lineup. Guys like John Birdie, guys like Garrett Hampson. I know I'm naming some really weird names here, but the Phillies are just a better team. They got, Schwarber, Castellanos, Harper, Bryson Stott, JT Realmuto, Trey Turner. The Trey Turner story is awesome. The fact that he was one of the worst players in baseball for the first 4 months. And then the Phillies fans are like, you know what? Let's give this guy a standing ovation just to show, what? We know you've been struggling, but we support you. You're here for 10 years. You're Philly made. We're going to support you. And ever since that moment, he has been back to normal Trey Turner. He's been really, really good. I think he's going to have a huge postseason. It's just set up for him to have a gargantuan of a postseason in front of that Philly crowd. I don't see any way the Phillies lose this series. The Marlins are good. Shout out Skip Schumacher managing that team to the playoffs. First real playoff appearance since 2003, because 2020 kind of has an asterisk by it. So, but the Phillies take this one, I think, and move on to play the Atlanta Braves in the divisional round. The next series is the Diamondbacks at the Brewers. So I'm wearing my Diamondbacks hat right now. If you've been following the show for a long time, you know that back in December last year, I predicted the Diamondbacks to make the playoffs, and I stuck with that prediction all year. And then sure enough, they sneak into the playoffs as the 6th seed. So, but one thing I didn't predict was them to go any farther than making the playoffs, and that will continue here. I'm going with the chalk again, the Milwaukee Brewers. It's in Milwaukee. This is the evening game. It's not the late game like Philly is, but it's the game right before. So the pitching matchups in this one, it's a little weird. The Diamondbacks threw their ace and their number 2 like at a weird setting this weekend. So actually leading off this series with game 1 is going to be Brandon Pfaadt. Pfaadt, wild name. And he's going up against Corbin Burns, the 2021 Cy Young Award winner. So I think game 1 goes easily to the Brewers, but I don't know. The Brewers have been playing really, really good ball as of recently. Guys like a dumbass, because that's what he is. He mashes home runs, but he doesn't really do anything else. Christian Yelich has been having a really good bounce back year. Guys like keep an eye out for guys like Andrew Monasterio to come in and have a pinch hit in a big moment in this series. Josh Donaldson, don't forget he's on the Brewers. Some other guys. I don't know. Their lineup is actually really bad. They just somehow win. But their bullpen, Joel Payamps, what's that? For the first name, Uribe. He's been really good as of recently. And then Devin Williams he might be my favorite pitcher to watch in all of baseball, which it's really hard for me to say that as a Cardinals fan, but I mean, this dude, watching him throw that floater or what, I think it's a splitter, but it just dies. Like it goes in, it looks like a fastball, and then it just drops out of the zone. It looks like the ball is floating. It literally looks like it's floating. That's why they call him the airbender. So if you don't have a lead past the 8th inning, then you're pretty much done because you got to face Devin Williams. For that reason, I got the Brewers in this series. So yeah, that was the pitching matchup in game 1. Pitching matchup in game 2 is Zach Gallen, who he's going to finish top 5 in Cy Young voting this year. He's the true ace. So probably he's going to be on the mound trying to avoid elimination, going up against Freddie Peralta, who is no chump himself. He's had a dominating second half. He's striking out everyone. And then in game 3, if necessary, it's Merrill Kelly, who started the game for the USA in the World Baseball Classic Championship against Japan. He was the starter in that game, versus Wade Miley, who, if it gets to this point and Wade Miley has to start game 3, he's going like 4 innings, and then Craig Counsell is going to throw in the bullpen. So I kind of expect a bullpen game. If that goes to 3, I could see this ending in 2 very easily, and the Brewers just move on to face the Dodgers. And while we're on the topic of the NL, before we get to the AL wildcard previews, I'm just going to stick with the NL. I'm going to go all out here. So for my bracket, I have the Brewers going against the Dodgers in the NLDS, and this is two very evenly matched teams. The Dodgers have a way better lineup, but the Brewers have way better pitching. The Dodgers just consistently, I mean, they dominate the regular season and then they get into the playoffs and they can't win shit. They just they just fizzle out. And I don't expect anything to change this year. I mean, the team is not any different. It's not any better than years past. Sure, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, both going to finish top 5 in MVP voting. They'll make their mark on the postseason. Don't get me wrong, but I don't even know who the Dodgers starters are going to be. I mean, they might be out there throwing Lance Lynn in a 5-game series, which that's not the type with a 6 ERA. That's not the type of guy you want out there, throwing big innings for you. Otherwise, they may be throwing rookies like Bobby Miller, Gavin Stone, Emmett Sheehan, guys like that. They really just don't have any consistency in the rotation, and that's one of the big spots in the postseason that you need is a couple big rotation guys. Clayton Kershaw, I think he's going to be going number 1 in this series. I would imagine. I don't know anyone else who would go number 1, but so I think Clayton Kershaw is your number 1 going in. He made an all-star team this year. He's obviously an all-time great, but other than that, it's looking really thin. And then Dave Roberts, we all know what he does in the postseason. I think I'm going to lean Milwaukee here. I've got off the Mil fraud key train, calling them frauds for the first 4 months of the year. I was like, this team is not really good. They just consistently win games. They're frauds. They're going to get exposed in the playoffs. Well, really, the last 2 months they're not frauds. They've been playing really good baseball, and even if they don't win this series against the Dodgers, even if they just compete, I think they'll give the Dodgers a good run for their money, and I think they'll move on. And then we have maybe the biggest series of the entire playoffs. The Phillies at the Braves. These are two fan bases that do not like each other. They are very passionate. The Phillies went to the World Series last year. The Braves went to the World Series the year before. This is going to be a dogfight. The Braves have one of the best lineups, honestly, in the history of baseball. They tied the MLB home run single season record at 307 with the 2019 Minnesota Twins. A little fun fact for that. I think guys like Max Kepler and Miguel Sano were on that team. So they were the leading home run. I think Nelson Cruz might have been on that team, but yeah, they tied that. They have 4 guys that have 30 home runs and 100 RBIs. Marcell Ozuna, Ozzie Albies, Ronald Acuna, who's going to win the MVP. He went 40 home runs, 70 stolen bases. And then they also have Matt Olson, who had over 50 home runs and over 120 RBIs. He is a prototypical first base cleanup hitter. And I mean, when you think about a World Series lineup, the Braves have it. They have easily the best lineup in baseball. So they have those 4 guys, and then they have guys like Austin Riley, who had, I think, 38 home runs, 97 RBIs. He's going to be in there playing some good defense. They got Arcia later at shortstop. He was an all-star. Nothing spectacular there, but they don't need him to be spectacular. And then they got veterans like Kevin Pillar, playing the outfield. So this team is just they're a wagon. They're a wagon. It's going to be a fun matchup with Philly. Philly got them last year. They beat them in 4 games. I don't think that happens again. I don't see a repeat of that. I don't think Atlanta lets it happen. I mean, Atlanta, their weakness, just like the Dodgers, rotation. They have Spencer Strider, who led the league in strikeouts, and it wasn't even particularly close. But his ERA was nearly 4. So he does give up runs despite striking everyone out. He's still going to be the ace. But, I mean, this lineup, it's so good that they're never out of a game. And then you also have guys, I'm trying to even think who's in the rotation right now. This is a bad moment for me. I'm supposed to be the ball knower. Max Fried in the rotation. I think Kyle Wright is back. I don't know if he'll be throwing playoff innings, though. He was out for most of the year. And then they always have random, just random guys that come in and just pitch really good. I know I'm missing a big name right now in the Braves rotation, and it is driving me nuts. This can't happen. This can't. I can't let this happen. Let me look at their rotation real quick here. Oh, of course, it's not going to show it to me. Charlie Morton. Don't forget about the Salt Man. Morton Salt, Charlie Morton. He's going to be throwing some big playoff innings in this game, or in this series, excuse me. He's kind of a dog. He's a World Series champion. And then they have Bryce Elder, also an all-star. How could I forget about him? He's going to be throwing some innings as well. He's a solid starter. It looks right now that Max Fried and Charlie Morton are injured, so we'll see if they get back in time. They're going to have about a week off before that season starts to get healthy and all that, and on the rotation side of things. And then they also have a really good bullpen, with what's his face, Iglesias, having closing out the games. It looks like he's not even on the roster though. Is that can't be? Oh, okay. Never mind. They have this set up really weird here on CBS Sports. Yeah, so Raisel Iglesias closing out games. The Braves are a wagon. They're going to win this series. And then I also think they're going to beat the Brewers in the NLCS in probably 5 games. And they're going to go back to the World Series. And I don't think anyone's going to be surprised. So that's the NL preview. I'll try to keep this around 30 minutes because it's just me talking. And I understand that can, if you don't know ball, this is not going to be an episode for you. So yeah, let's move on to the AL. This is maybe the more interesting games, at least in the wild card round, because we're starting off with the Rays and the Rangers, right? That's the first game on Tuesday. It's going to be the first game, I think, for all of them. It's at the Trop, so you're not going to get the weird shadow stuff that usually happens in the postseason because it's, in the Dome, obviously, in Tampa Bay. And the Rays are the second best team in the AL. They had 99 wins. They're really, really good. 9 more wins than the Rangers, by the way. The Rangers were in first place all year, so I think it's going to be a little weird for people to see, like, well, the Rangers are the 5 seed. They have to go on the road in the first round of the playoffs. It doesn't sit right with a lot of people. It doesn't sit right with me either. But it is what it is. The Astros are inevitable. I don't see any way this series doesn't go 3 games. This is 2 wagons right here. The 2 best teams for the first half of the year, really. The Rays and the Rangers. In game 1, they have set up the pitching matchup is Jordan Montgomery, former Cardinal. How about that? Shout out to him getting the game 1 start in the playoffs. Shout out to him. Versus Tyler Glasnow, which, if you know anything about baseball, you know that his name is, Glass now. He is Glass, and he's Glass now because he always gets hurt. So he'll probably last about 4 or 5 innings at the most, but then that Rays bullpen will take over. They're kind of like the Dodgers or the Brewers in the way where they just use their bullpen in the perfect way where it works out and they win games. And game 2, the pitching matchup is set up with Nathan Eovaldi and Zach Eflin. 2 really good pitchers there. And then game 3 is Andrew Heaney, the Heen dog, versus Aaron Civale. So that is mid on mid, if you ask me, for game 3. So that could be really bad if we get to game 3. That could get really sicko. Both of these lineups could really tee off of those guys, and it could be a high-scoring, fun game 3. But the Rays, they're heavily injured. Jose Siri got hurt. Yandy Diaz tweaked something. Obviously, the rotation is really down right now, but I got the Rays. I got the Rays in this series. I think it will go 3 games. The Rangers lineup is so good, but the problem with the Rangers is their bullpen. Aroldis Chapman, who they acquired right before the deadline, really bad. He's blown a ton of saves. They all like Brock Burke. He's been bad. Let me look up some of their other guys just to make fun of them. Will Smith, he's been probably their most consistent reliever. Chris Stratton, former Cardinal, he's been really bad since he's been over. Josh Sabors, Martin Perez, who started off in the rotation, was so bad he had to go to the bullpen. Matt Bush, some of these guys, they just haven't had a consistent bullpen all year. They've blown as many saves, or they've blown as many save opportunities as they have saved in those saved opportunities. So it's a hit or miss when the Rangers have the lead going late into the game. Nothing's safe, and that is why you have to go with the Rays, because the Rays bullpen is locked down. I can't even name the guys in their bullpen other than maybe a Erasmo Ramirez. Pete Fairbanks is their closer, but they just have so many random guys that'll come out and give a shutout inning. They'll probably have like 3 guys that pitch all 3 games, all 3 shutout innings, and that's just what it's going to be. They're going to pitch. The Rangers, their strength is hitting, but a lot of these guys don't have playoff experience. I mean, you look at their lineup. Adolis Garcia never played in the playoffs. Corey Seager did win a World Series MVP. That is the exception, along with Marcus Semien, although he doesn't have a ton. I think he's maybe played 1 year with the Blue Jays with playoff experience. But Corey Seager is the exception here. Won a World Series MVP. So I think he's gonna have a good postseason. And you got guys. I'm drawing blanks now. I should have wrote some of this stuff down. Nathaniel Lowe. That's another storyline I'll talk about here in a second. Josh Young, who was on pace to win Rookie of the Year before he got hurt. Leody Tavares, Robbie Grossman, Evan Carter, all guys. They can all rake. They rake, but I don't think they're going to rake enough to win. And then probably another storyline that is going to get brought up in this series is Josh Lowe and Nathaniel Lowe. Josh Lowe on the Rays, obviously. Brothers. And they're playing against each other in the playoff series. So this is going to be reminiscent of Kelsey, Jason, and Travis last year in the Super Bowl. The announcers will not stop talking about it. They will not shut up about it. The brothers playing against each other. I think Josh gets the best of Nate here. And then the last series is Minnesota and Toronto. This is kind of like a who cares series. This is going to be the forgotten series, although I do think that Minnesota wins this. And now, hear me out. Minnesota hasn't won a game. They haven't won a playoff game since 2004. I do believe their streak is at like 18 games or something straight that they've lost in the playoffs. Like, not series, playoff games. They've gotten swept every time they've been in the playoffs since 2004. That is just insane. I think that ends this year. And mostly because their rotation is really, really good. In game 1, they're going up against Kevin Gossman of the Blue Jays, but they have Pablo Lopez going. He'll match him just fine. Game 2 is Jose Barrios for the Blue Jays, former Twin, by the way. So that could be a little bit of a revenge matchup. And the Twins have Sonny Gray going. He's going to finish top 3 in AL Cy Young voting this year, I believe. So, I mean, take that as you will. Ugh, good water. Stay hydrated. And then game 3 is Chris Bassett versus Joe Ryan, which I don't like them throwing Joe Ryan here at game 3. He kind of gives up some home runs, and if they do get into this game 3 scenario, I actually don't like that. I didn't know they were throwing him. Well, but Pablo Lopez, Sonny Gray, that is a hell of a 1-2 punch at the beginning of the series that the Blue Jays haven't lived up to their potential all year. I think John Schneider's a bum. I predicted him to miss the playoffs this year, and they barely snuck in over the Mariners. And I really think that John Schneider's going to get fired this year because they're going to lose this series to the Twins in the playoffs. And, looking at those pitching matchups, it's actually not like a huge advantage for Minnesota as much as I was thinking. But Minnesota just has some really cool guys that just rake for him. Matt Wallner, for example. I know everyone's going to be talking about Carlos Correa, obviously because he signed the big deal with the Twins in the offseason, but he's not even a top 5 hitter on this team, I don't think. Royce Lewis is better. Eddie Julian has been raking. Max Kepler has been one of the best hitters in the American League. And then, you got guys like Ryan Jeffers that just rake. And then you got Correa. That's kind of like below all those guys. So take that as you will. The Blue Jays have the bigger names. They got Vladdy. They got Bo Bichette. You all know that. They haven't done shit in the postseason ever. That core group of Vladdy, Bo Bichette, Matt Chapman, that group of guys was Teoscar Hernandez, but they traded him. They haven't done anything in the postseason. So we talk about the Twins having a really bad postseason record. They got a fresh slate of guys here. The Blue Jays have a really bad postseason record with these guys. That is the reason why I'm taking Minnesota. Yeah, they don't have a ton of postseason experience. Blue Jays don't have a ton of good postseason experience. So, I don't know. It's going to be a close series. All these series really are going to be close. I think really even the biggest blowout one would be Philly and Miami, but I think Miami will play them close. So, some fun wild card series. Obviously, you got to miss the wild card game, the one game. The Game 7 atmosphere. You win and you're in, almost like a play-in game. But the wild card series, it's a little fun. It's a little more drawn out. It'll give you something to look forward to in the middle of this week. And let's move on to the ALDS before we wrap up here. Did I pick all four? Yeah, I picked all four home teams to win. So none of the 5 or 6 seeds are moving on in my bracket, which I don't like that at all. Because I know for sure one of them will. It just always happens that way. But anyway, Houston at Minnesota, Minnesota at Houston for the ALDS. Houston's just a better team. I would think I would be shocked if Minnesota won this series and pulled it off. Houston hasn't missed the ALCS since 2016. I think that was the last time they weren't in the ALCS. So that's 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. 20. So they're going for their 7th straight ALCS appearance, and I think that they're going to get it. I think that 2 seed was huge. If they got that 6 seed, they didn't win the division, it was going to be tough. It was going to be a really tough path to the ALCS, but I think now that they just got to win 3 games now, and they're there again. So congrats, Houston. And then this sets up my personal World Series. I would be perfectly fine if this was the World Series. Baltimore at Tampa Bay. Not at, God, I'm messing this up. Tampa Bay at Baltimore. Excuse me. Huge matchup. Baltimore won 101 games, I think. Tampa won 99. They were the 2 best teams in the AL by far all year. They were neck and neck with each other. Tampa had the huge first month. During the month of July, they kind of fell off. They had a really bad month of July, but other than that, they've been a really, really rock solid team all year. And then Baltimore, I mean, people are talking about their rotation. People are talking about their lack of playoff experience. I don't think they care about that. I don't think Brandon Hyde, I don't think any of those guys out there care that they don't have playoff experience. They just won 100 games. They got guys in the rotation too. Kyle Bradish, really underrated. He is a bona fide ace. If you go look up some of his stats, some of his splits, Kyle Bradish, get to know his name because he's going to be a big-time playoff performer. You got veterans like Kyle Gibson, St. Louis native. Shout out to him. He's going to be throwing some big innings. And then you also have, I'm interested. This is maybe my most interesting thing that I'm interested in this postseason. That was a lot of interested. I apologize for that. John Means coming back. John Means has been the Orioles ace for a few years now. But about midway through last year, he had to get Tommy John surgery, so he's been out. He came back about a month ago. He's been pitching for about a month, and he's been pitching really, really well. He's been going deep into games. He has not been giving up runs. I think this is a guy, if they do start him in the rotation, he's going to be a dog. But if they move him to the bullpen, just because he hasn't really pitched all year, if they do move him to the bullpen, this is a guy that there's always a team, usually the team that wins the World Series, that puts one of their starters in the bullpen and they become a huge part of the playoff run. If the Orioles decide to do that with John Means, I think he's that guy. I would prefer they start him. I think he would create more value. in the starting rotation. But yeah, John Means is a wild card in this series. I think he's the wild card for the Orioles and their ticket to the World Series, which I think the Orioles win this series, which I have gone back and forth on. I mean, all month when I've been predicting the playoffs, I've at times been like the Rays are going to the World Series, and I'm like, no, I'm back on Baltimore. Baltimore's going to the World Series. And then a few days ago, I was like, I'm picking the Rays. That's my pick out of the AL. And then now, obviously, I'm looking at it and I'm going with Baltimore. So really, either way, I think the winner of this series takes down Houston in the ALCS, and I think it's going to be Baltimore. They've been the better team all year. They've, the head-to-head record against the Orioles have the head-to-head record against the Rays. They have the head-to-head record against Houston. They're just the best team in the AL. They have Yennier Cano at the end of their bullpen closing out games. Their bullpen is really good too. Obviously, they lost Felix Bautista, which sucks. Before he got hurt, people were talking about him maybe even putting together a Cy Young run. And as a reliever, that is just unheard of. That's how good he was. So losing him for the rest of the year really, really sucks for them. But they still have Yennier Cano, which he was an all-star and he wasn't even a closer. So that's how good he was. He's going to be really good in the playoffs. And yeah, like I just said, I think the Orioles take down Houston in the ALCS, setting up a 1 seed versus 1 seed in the World Series, which doesn't happen very often. And I do feel kind of weird going chalk in this. But I just think that's what's going to happen. And then I think I'm obligated to take the Braves. Excuse me. God, talking so long gives me a need for water. It just makes my throat hurt. But I'm obligated to take the Braves because they were my preseason pick to win the World Series. They're the best team in the entire MLB. And I think I just have to stick with my guns, even though I would love to see the Orioles win the World Series. And I wouldn't be shocked, actually, if that's what happened. I think they're really, really, despite being the 1 seed, the best team in the AL, getting a bye and all that, I still think that they're underrated. And it's just because it's the Orioles. It's that orange bird that people look at that orange bird and they're like, they can't win in the postseason. And I get that. I mean, I look at the Texas T and I say they can't win in the postseason. It's something like some people are going to look at the Twins, the TC, and be like, that team can't win in the playoffs. I understand it. I mean, it makes sense if that's the reason why. But if you've been following baseball, this team they're just good. And I know it's something about, Houston's the big bad. They're the big bad wolf in the AL. I don't think it matters. I think Baltimore is just better, and I think they're gonna go to the World Series. But yeah, it's Braves. It's got to be the Braves, and I think that they take their second World Series in 3 years. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, after the playoffs ended last year, I picked the next 10 World Series winners. So, like, obviously, after the first 3, it was just making up teams to win the World Series. But in that prediction, I had the Braves winning the 2023 World Series. So I've been on that for a while, and I think I just have to stick with it, because if I don't stick with it and they do win, then, who am I? I got to stand by my take. So I got the Braves. Jacob Baldwin sent me his playoff predictions, so I'm going to read those off here. Give me a second. So he has, in the AL, the Blue Jays beating the Twins and the Rays beating the Rangers. And then he has the Jays upsetting the Houston Astros. I would like to ask him why exactly. What does he see in the Blue Jays to beat the Astros? But yeah, that's his prediction. And then he has the Rays beating the Orioles, and obviously the Rays beating the Jays in the ALCS. And then in the NL, he has the Brewers beating the Diamondbacks, Phillies beating the Marlins, Dodgers taking down the Brewers, and Braves taking down the Phillies. And then he has the Braves going to the World Series to face the Rays. So that's a solid World Series prediction, honestly. And then he says Braves in 6, which I should probably say that too. We haven't had a Game 7 in a while in the MLB, so I'll go Braves in 7. I want to see a Game 7 atmosphere. And Camden says Rays and Braves in the World Series. Obviously, if you know anything about Cam, he doesn't like to give playoff predictions. He just gives the World Series. So yeah, he does. He says Rays and Braves, which I do believe is what he had in our MLB season preview in the preseason. So yeah, and then he has the Braves winning. So a clean sweep. All three of us have the Braves winning. How could that go wrong? Both of them have the Rays, so I guess that makes me a little different going the Orioles. I feel better about it now because I was going to go the Rays, and then I changed my mind going into this that it was going to the Orioles. So I'm glad we don't all have chalk here. But happy postseason. If you're still listening at this point, that is incredible because if I had to listen to my voice for 35 minutes, yikes. But yeah, if you're still listening, shout out. We'll be back for the normal show on Thursday. We'll be talking some football. We'll probably be talking the end of the Cardinals season, obviously with sending out Wainwright and maybe even, around the MLB, sending out Miguel Cabrera, Brandon Crawford, Zach Greinke, guys like that. And then we'll probably talk, wild card series. So my voice is about drained. I'm going to get out of here and we'll see you on Thursday or Friday.